Hello everyone, hope you're well. It was great last week, wasn't it, to hear about Paul in Athens and to have the exciting Mission Sunday. That was really good. And today we're starting a couple of lessons before Easter Sunday from the Gospel of Matthew. Today's lesson is from Matthew chapter 26. Now I want you to imagine that one of your close friends, one of your best friends, stops being friends with you and does something really nasty, does something that really hurts you. It's awful, isn't it? Sometimes we have that with our kids. Sometimes our kids come home from school and everything's great and they've got lots of best friends and they're really happy and they love their best friends. But sometimes they come home from school and things are not so good. Sometimes they come home from school and maybe their best friend hasn't spoken to them, or their best friend doesn't want to play with them, and maybe sometimes their best friend has done something nasty or said something nasty, and it really hurts in there, doesn't it? Now the same thing happened to Jesus as well. One of Jesus' close friends really hurt him and let down his trust and betrayed him. And the lesson today is about that and about what happened. And what I want you to remember though, the thread throughout the whole lesson is that even though Jesus was betrayed by one of his close friends, that wasn't a surprise. Jesus knew that it was all part of God's plan so that people could be saved. And even though his close friend betrayed him and really hurt him, it was not a surprise to him, and Jesus still wanted to do God's will. Now, as you know, Jesus had 12 close friends, and so there was Peter, there was Andrew, there was James, there was John, and they went everywhere with him, and they did lots of great things, and they learned lots of lessons, and they listened to Jesus preach. Now, one of the 12 disciples was a man called Judas Iscariot. And I'm going to read a couple of verses from Matthew, and it really brings it home to you the enormity and the seriousness of what Judas did. So let me read Matthew chapter 26, verse 14, 15 and 16. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you?" So the question is, what are you willing to give me if I betray Jesus and let you capture him? So they counted out for him 30 silver coins. And from then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. So Judas watched for an opportunity to give Jesus up to be captured by the authorities. Now, 30 silver coins, that was the amount that the chief priests counted out for Judas. And that was the price that had been agreed for the betrayal and ultimately for Jesus' life. Now I've got 30 silver coins here. Can you see them? 30 silver coins. It's not a very big pile, is it? It's not a very big pile. And when the chief priests were counting them out for Judas, they were counting them out. We don't really know if they were counting them out one by one or if they had them in piles and they just gave Judas a few piles. We don't know the details. And it would be interesting to wonder what Judas was thinking. So when Judas had the pile of money getting bigger in his hand, was he thinking about the things that he would buy, or was he thinking about Jesus? You wonder, don't you? Was he thinking about the good times that he had had with Jesus and the closeness that they had enjoyed and the meals that they had shared and the lessons that Jesus had taught? And we don't know. We don't know what Judas was thinking, but we do know that for this amount of money, Judas agreed to betray Jesus. And it wasn't a huge amount of money, and this is a few quid, and the equivalent in today's money would be maybe 10 or 15,000 pounds. And it's a lot of money, it's a lot of pocket money for you, but it won't change your life. And if your parents had 10 or 15,000 pounds, then you might go on a couple of good holidays, or you might be able to get a new car, but you won't be able to get a new house. You won't be able to stop working, your parents won't be able to stop working for 10 or 15,000 pounds. It's not a massive amount of money. It wasn't going to change Judas's life, but that was the amount that he agreed to sell Jesus for. Isn't that shocking? Isn't that so bad? But Jesus knew what Judas was going to do. There were no surprises for Jesus. Jesus knew God's plan. Jesus knew that he needed to be betrayed. He needed to go to the cross and die so that we could be forgiven. Now, Judas was showing that he was only pretending to be Jesus' friend, and he wasn't actually Jesus' friend. And we'll think more about that at the end. But I want you to remember that. Two things. Jesus knew God's plan, was working through God's plan, and Judas was only pretending to be his friend, and Judas was not actually Jesus' friend. Then one night Jesus took the disciples to a place called Gethsemane. He knew it was the time for him to be captured, to be arrested and to die, so that he could save people from their sins just as God had planned. Jesus knew it was God's plan. Jesus knew that it was the right thing to do, but he still found it hard. And he was hurting and he was full of sadness, full of sorrow. So he took Peter and James and John and he told them to pray. He took them away from the others. He told Peter, James and John to pray while he was also going to pray. And he went a little bit away from the other disciples again. And Jesus went over there. He said, Peter, James and John, watch and pray. He went over there and he said that he was praying. And he prayed, Lord, let your will be done and give me the strength to do your will and to follow in your ways. He went back. Peter, James and John, were they sleeping? Were they praying as he had told them to? No, they were sleeping. They were really tired. They had fallen asleep and they weren't praying. And he said to them, could you men not keep watch for 1 hour? When we watch films as a family, I don't always stay awake. And my girls say to me, Papa, why could you not even stay awake for one film? And the disciples were so sleepy and they fell asleep just when they were told to watch and pray. Jesus needed them. He needed their prayers, but they didn't pray for him at that time. And so Jesus said to them again, he said to them a second time, he said, watch and pray. Jesus went over there and he was praying again to his Father and he was saying, let your will be done and give me the strength to obey your will. Give me the strength to do what needed to be done. And then he went back to his disciples and again he found them sleeping. This happened a third time. Watch and pray. Jesus went over there, praying to his Father. He knew that the only way that people could be saved from their sin was that if he followed through God the Father's perfect plan, that Jesus would die, rise again, and so that we could put our trust in him, so that we could be forgiven. So Jesus was praying. He went back and he said, you're still sleeping. Could you not pray for me? And while he was still saying these things, Jesus knew that Judas was coming at the time. The Bible says that while Jesus was still speaking, Judas came. And at the start, do you remember we read how Judas was looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus? And this was his opportunity. So Judas came with a great crowd, and the great crowd had swords and they had sticks, all to arrest Jesus. And Judas had arranged a signal with the crowd, so they knew who to arrest, and he told them to take the one who he kissed. So at once he went to Jesus, he greeted Jesus, and he kissed Jesus. Now Jesus didn't try and fight back. Jesus didn't fight back when he was arrested and when the men tried to take him, but one of his disciples did, and Peter took his sword. Peter cut off the ear of one of the servants, and Jesus told Peter off. Jesus said, that's not the way that my Father's will is going to be followed, is going to be carried out. So Jesus healed the man's ear, and Jesus could have called down thousands of angels from heaven. Jesus could have had all the help that he wanted, and he didn't need to let the men arrest him. But he knew that he was following God's path, and he was doing God's will so that he could ultimately make the way that we could be saved. So 2 lessons from today's passage, 2 lessons that I want you to remember, please. Lesson 1, lesson from Judas. Jesus knows if you are a true friend of his or a pretend friend. Jesus knows if you are a true friend of his or a pretend friend, and it's so important that you are a true friend of Jesus. For all the years that Judas was with Jesus and the other 11 disciples, and when Judas was spending time with them, he looked like one of the other disciples. And the disciples even trusted him with the money. Now we can often go to church and read our Bibles, and we do all the right things. And maybe we answer a lot of the questions and the quizzes in the Sunday school, and we might look like a Christian on the outside. But God looks at our heart, God looks inside us, and he knows who we really are. And He doesn't want us to pretend to look like someone else. He doesn't want us to pretend to be a Christian. And our hearts truly need to be changed. So have a think, please. Have a think and ask yourself, have you really asked Jesus to change your heart? Or are you pretending to look like someone that is following Jesus? So the second point from today's passage is, let's thank God for Jesus. Let's thank Jesus that he was ready to suffer and die because he knew that it was God's plan to save his people. Even through the hurt of Judas letting him down and Judas's betrayal, even through the pain of his disciples not watching and not praying as he had asked them to, but instead sleeping on the job, even through the crowd capturing him and arresting him and taking him, he knew that he had to die. He knew that was the only way that we could be saved. So are you like Judas, maybe looking good on the outside, but your heart is not loving Jesus on the inside? Or are you loving Jesus? Are you thanking him for obeying God's wonderful plan so that we can be saved? So I hope you remember that. Now you can do lesson 14 in your workbook, and hope you have a good week and hope to see you soon.